Hello, everybody. Welcome to Taped Crusaders, the podcast that reviews every single superhero TV show and movie in history. I'm your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by...
That's a tall order. Joshua Marvell. I'm happy to be back.
This one, we're number 5. We're going to be going for a while, so keep your podcast schedule clear for what you're listening to. Oh, and this week we've got a special returning guest. Kelly is with us again. Hello, Kelly.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us again so soon after your previous appearance on Slam.
Well, back again.
Yeah, and it kind of worked out.
Muddle through the comic book world that I know nothing about.
That's perfect. That's why you're the perfect guest for us. So this week, it's actually, again, I'm not sure exactly when this episode will come out, but I think it'll time out kind of perfectly, but just by sheer coincidence, we're reviewing Shazam this week, and the film is about to come out in 2 days. Yeah. So I think the movie review might actually come out first by the time this goes to our podcast schedule. But before we jump into this episode, I always ask this, Kelly, always being once before on your previous appearance, but what did you know about Captain Marvel or Shazam before we did this episode?
Okay, well, first of all, I thought that Shazam and Captain Marvel were 2 different people. So, well, technically,
yeah, before we go any further, Shazam is the name of the wizard that gives Captain Marvel his powers. Captain Marvel is the superhero, but now, ever since 2011, DC has started calling the superhero Shazam as well. Very confusing, yeah.
It really is it that recent that they switched the names?
Yeah,
that's so interesting.
How about this? I'll give you the 45-second history of Captain Marvel, okay? So, 1938, DC introduces Superman. A year or two later, Fawcett Comics introduces Captain Marvel, which is somewhat of a knockoff of Superman. Dark hair, super strong. He could actually fly before Superman could, okay? But with the benefit of great art by C.C. Beck and some really good writing by Ed Hamilton, the comic actually was arguably more whimsical, more creative, more funny. Captain Marvel introduced a family of characters first. So there was Mary Marvel, Captain Marvel Jr., Uncle Marvel, Tall Marvel, all these other characters. The book became so popular, it's actually the only superhero comic in history to sell more than Superman. So in the 40s, it was selling more than Superman. That's how popular it was. He had his own cereal, his film cereal. Merchandise, all that stuff. Anyway, eventually DC launched a lawsuit against Fawcett Comics, took them to court. It lasted for years. By the time it came to the 1950s, sales were down on all superheroes, so Fawcett gave up. DC bought the rights to Captain Marvel and then let it collect dust for about 20 years, didn't do anything with it, brought it back in the 70s, and by that point, Marvel Comics had purchased the copyright or the trademark to Captain Marvel, and then introduced their version of Captain Marvel, which was the Kree alien with the white and green suit, who was gender swapped and portrayed by Annette Bening in the Captain Marvel movie with Brie Larson.
Right.
So that was the original Captain Marvel. That Captain Marvel
Annette
got killed.
Bening was in that movie?
For a brief cameo, yep.
Oh, all right.
And so Marvel has now had like 5 different Captain Marvels. But meanwhile, back at DC keeps trying to bring back this version of Captain Marvel, but he never quite works because in the original comics, it was much more outlandish than Superman. And so, like, for example, he had a friend, Tawny the Talking Tiger, and his main villain was Mr. Mind, who was a little worm with a radio transmitter on his his neck that, like, translated his thoughts into speech. So it was crazy, right?
Now, that reminds me of Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, stuff like that, exactly. And, I mean, if DC wanted to get creative, they could make it work. But they're always trying to fit everything into one coherent universe like Marvel. And so these wacky concepts don't fit. And so Captain Marvel always fails. And so anyway, a few years ago, they brought out the movie. And I think because they knew the merchandising and the adaptations were coming, they finally said, okay, we can't keep calling him Captain Marvel. We'll just call the character Shazam. Okay. So going back to the 70s, when they brought back the comic book, they called the comic book Shazam. But they still called the character Captain Marvel from 73 to 2011. Okay. That's where it gets really confusing.
That's where the confusion is.
And to make it even more confusing, starting, I believe, this month, DC's launching a new Shazam series, and they're renaming the superhero a third time. Now they're going to call him the Captain.
Really?
So, yeah.
That sounds lame.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's worse than both for sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
it almost sounds like
first...
if they're calling him the Captain, like Captain Crunch, Captain what?
I know. The people have proposed, like, they just call him Captain Thunder or something. Just so it sounds a little bit more like a superhero. But to me, I'm like, just keep it... Put it this way. Where's the rule that says the name of the franchise has to be the name of the character?
Yeah.
Why can't it just be Shazam?
True.
That's the name of the franchise. And then, you read the story or you watch the movie and the guy's called Captain Marvel. Big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. Okay, so Kelly, you are actually the one, when I asked you which episodes you wanted to be on, you had mentioned Shazam, the TV show. So you have seen this TV show before, right?
No.
Okay.
I've seen...
Okay,
No.
You've seen the movie.
I saw the movie, yeah.
Okay.
Because I liked Zachary, Levi, and Chuck.
Okay. So you did not see this show when you were a kid or anything then? Okay.
How would I? It came out before I was born.
Well, technically it came out before I was born too, but reruns,
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
I did not see it.
Okay. So I caught this as a kid. There was another superhero show. It was called, I'm going to look it up right now, Kids Superpower Hour, okay?
That sounds familiar.
It was awesome, and it had animated segments with Captain Marvel. And, yeah, and that's where I think that's actually probably what I remember as a kid. That's where I was introduced to Captain Marvel, Black Adam, Mary Marvel, all those characters were in there. And that lasted from 81 to 82. So, yeah, that's probably what I actually saw as a kid. And you want to know something really interesting?
Yeah, but how would you recall that? Because, we were, real little.
But that's just because I saw it and then I saw the comic book. So it's kind of like it's just burned into my memory, It's
okay.
I just knew this franchise of Shazam. But anyway, I was just looking it up briefly, and apparently the second episode was written by Paul Dini, who we all know as one of the main creators of the Batman cartoon from the 90s, which is pretty interesting.
That is
anyway.
Cool. I actually didn't even know that this was a show. I had no idea until you sent the email. I had never heard of it.
Interesting.
I had heard of a lot of the older DC live action shows, but for some reason I guess I just missed this one.
Yeah, it slipped under the radar. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you know how many seasons it went for?
A grand total of 1.
1? Oh, okay.
So
actually, you know what? On the Wikipedia page, it says it had 3 seasons.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong then.
Okay.
I mean,
I
don't know if Wikipedia is right, but...
No, you know what? You're right. I think I was thrown off because there's 28 episodes, and so I think I just guessed that there was 1. But it's actually 15, 7, and 6. I'm just looking it up right now. So you're right. 3 seasons. So yeah, I guess it was successful then if it lasted 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, Shazam, Captain Marvel did star in a serial in the 1940s called The Adventures of Captain Marvel. So if you go back to the 40s and look at the film serials from back then, there was a lot that you'd forget about. Like even Josh, have you ever heard of the Blackhawks?
No.
The Blackhawks is a property from, I think it's Quality Comics, but it was huge in the 50s. They had their own film series. I think they had their own TV show. Yeah, these are things that just came and went, and everyone forgets about them, but DC still owns them, so we just think of it as an obscure DC property, but at one point these were all pretty big. So anyway, so we're going to talk about this TV show. Now, everyone listening to this, I assume, has seen the movie. They're about to see the second movie. They know the comics. They know the concept. Well, in this TV show, they obviously change things a little bit.
Yeah.
They do allude to the origin.
A little bit.
But the origin, whenever they show the the 7 deadly sins or all the gods that give Captain Marvel's powers, they're animated. Very
animation is a strong.
It's a stretch. Limited animation, we'll call it.
It's essentially a painting.
Very Masters of the Universe looking.
Right. It's essentially a painting, and then it's just their mouths that have 2 shapes, like a close and an open type thing, and they just way more than needed, I think, pop into Billy's mind and give him some guidance.
Yeah, so we should also point out, okay, you know what? Let's just talk about what happens in this episode. So we're introduced to the concept, which is totally different from the comics. Basically, Billy Batson, like the comics, is a reporter, but he's on the road, driving in like a camper or Winnebago with a guy who's just called Mentor, or the Mentor. He's an old man.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, that's the only similarity to the comics. Oh, and he says Shazam, and he turns into Captain Marvel. But other than that, there's no Mary Marvel, there's no Captain Marvel Jr., there's no, he's not an orphan as far as we know. Or if he is, it's not really, they don't really dwell on it. But it's a lot different from the comics.
So is this a thing where he goes around in an RV, or was that created for the show?
That's just for the show.
Interesting.
Strictly created for the show, yeah.
That
so
stuff
it's just,
would not fly these days.
No, so it's just kind
An
of like
old
their
man
way.
with a kid in an RV traveling around.
So it's just kind of like their way of writing this to be an episodic show, right?
Exactly.
Where they can travel around, go to new places, and see new characters every single episode.
100%.
Gotcha.
Which is, I mean, that's also the formula they used for the Hulk, except the Hulk was on the run, which people always say, well, that's just a ripoff of The Fugitive.
Right. But it also, like, feels more in character.
Yeah, that
Bruce
feels
Banner,
like a big
right?
sense for the Hulk.
Like
because-
this does seem very out of place for a little kid.
I agree. Well, also we should point out, we'll get to these actors later, but this kid is not quite a kid. He looks like a teenager, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, he's not
like
even much
late teens.
Yeah, he's not even much smaller than Captain Marvel.
You're right.
Like when they do the whole like
Captain Marvel in
transformation
this looks like he's 40 years
sequence.
Yeah.
Right. When they do the transformation sequence, he just kind of like grows like maybe 5 inches. Like it's not much. And I don't think Captain Marvel looks small necessarily in this. Like he like muscle wise, but when you compare him to the kid who is he's in like a tight sweater and you can tell that Billy Batson's actor is kind of jacked
in shape.
When he does the transformation, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a crazy power.
See, this is okay. Number one, these were different times. The actors
for sure.
in these days, for some reason, I mean, for good or ill, they did not have to be in the kind of shape that actors have to be in now. Like, if you look at this guy playing Captain Marvel, he is like Josh said, he's average shape, maybe. Like, he's not overweight, but it's not. He doesn't look like a superhero, right? He doesn't look like Henry Cavill,
right? And I think too, it's the suit. I think the suit kind of lends to that. Like, a lot of the suits that you see today in like comic book movies, they're enhanced so that way you can still see all of the muscles. And I'm sure that there's a lot of padding and stuff like that too. Where this is
back then it was just spandex.
Yeah. So it hides a lot of like, you know, the muscle detail and stuff like that, which is fine. But I think it's just way more obvious when the Billy Batson actor isn't that much smaller than the Captain Marvel actor. So
okay, so we watched the first episode of season 1, and it's called The Joyriders, and I'm going to quickly summarize this one. They kind of just jump into it. They do not. They have his origin kind of in the credits, right?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah,
do they? I didn't really notice.
Wait a minute. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, so they explain his origin a little bit in the credits. And then basically we just jump in and we're in the middle of the action. And first thing that happens is we're introduced to a group of hooligans, like teenage kids. I think there's 4 of them. 3 of them are kind of like the bad kids, and 1 of them is the kid with a conscience, right? And they kind of spend their time stealing. Is it cars or bikes?
Cars.
Bikes. They're riding around on bikes, but they're going and stealing cars or borrowing them. as Mike, the bad kid,
borrowing.
likes to say.
Right. Yeah, borrowing. And so then we're introduced to Billy Batson and his mentor. And as they're driving along, Billy kind of flashes into like a vision of the gods talking to him. And at one point they give like a little lesson, right? Like a little not, what do you call that? Almost like not a proverb. But, they go, these words from Shakespeare's Hamlet may help you.
Yeah.
This above all, to thine own self be true. Hey, great quote. But couldn't they get a quote from like ancient Greece or some Greek play or something, right?
Something related to the people that are providing
the
information, right? Like, here's a great quote from David Mamet, like author of American Buffalo, like why go to Shakespeare. But anyway, so then we flash back and Billy Batson's like, oh, I wonder what that meant. He doesn't know. So then we cut over and we see the group of kids, and they come across this car, and they're trying to convince the good kid with the glasses. That's how we know he's good. He wears glasses. To help them steal this car. He doesn't want to help them, but he goes along with them anyway. They steal this nice red car. Maybe someone who knows cars. Josh, do you know cars? What kind of car is this?
Oh, I do not know cars.
Okay, because I don't either.
No, definitely
I'm one of those
not.
people. I could be in a car.
It's red.
And it's a red car.
It's a nice 70s like sports car.
Like it's a
nice.
boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long car. So anyway,
it sure is. It's got 4 wheels.
2 doors.
The windows are open.
It's got one of those round things that controls it on the inside.
Something like that. Yep. So anyway, then they kick the good kid out of the group, and then just at that moment, the Winnebago pulls up, and Billy Batson gets out of the car, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. So the good kid from the group runs away. They chase after him, and they find out kind of what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on a sec here. I'm actually watching the episode as we're talking. So he tracks him. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
So Billy kind of jumps out and starts talking to Chuck, who didn't make it into the car. And Chuck immediately just starts running away. So Billy chases him throughout the city. And they end up running back into Mike and the other 2 boys in the car. And later on, they meet up again, like the 4 boys, and they're kind of like, listen, Chuck, we don't want to hang out with you anymore. You're out of the club. You didn't come steal the car with us. And Chuck's kind of like, okay, I'll do it again. Let's go. Or no. He's like, if you could forgive me, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, okay, we'll forgive you if you come steal another car with us. So then Chuck's kind of like, I don't know about all this. So he's upset.
Right.
And
so then they let
Billy and Mentor are like driving around looking for them again, because they're kind of like, well, we can't leave these kids without teaching them a lesson. It looks like, this little kid needs our help. So,
so then they go
to a store.
Yeah, and then
when they come out of the store, the good kid's bike has been stolen.
Right.
Yeah, which kind of ties into the theme of the episode a little bit, right?
Yeah, we've seen this whole episode that Chuck is kind of like very cautious and likes to follow the rules, and is like, he also is like very careful with his stuff.
But he's afraid to speak up.
Right. We also see him at the start, like we specifically see like a close-up shot of him locking up his bike when he first gets to the restaurant, and then we see him unlocking it and then locking it up again, I think a second time. And then it's like a big deal when they get to the store. They're only running in for some snacks and then coming right back out. And his friends kind of tease him for locking up his bike. So he's like, fine, I won't lock up my bike. And when they come back, his bike is the only one that's stolen, of course.
Right.
So all of his friends kind of ditch him for to go find his bike by himself, and they're going to the dealership now to steal a new car.
Right. So they end up stealing the car. This time it's a blue car. I don't know what kind it is, but it's blue.
Yeah, another nice one.
Another nice car. And then Mentor and Billy Batson go after them to stop them. And
right. And the three kids also like force Chuck into the car. Right. Like he's there kind of like trying to get them to help him find his bike. And they're like,
oh, I thought he was trying to like take the keys away from them so they didn't steal the car.
I think that's what happened is like he took the keys and then they grabbed him and threw him into the car and then they took off with him in the car.
Right.
And that's when Billy and Mentor kind of show up in the RV and start chasing them. And it all leads to kind of this climactic scene where they hide out in a car junkyard.
But yeah, no, so let me jump in because I got to talk about, because this is my favorite part. So this is the part, there's actually something about superhero TV shows. I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but I almost have anxiety when I watch these shows because my stomach is in knots because I'm just waiting. When is Bruce Banner going to turn to the Hulk? When is whatever, right? When is when is Clark Kent going to turn to Superman? You're just waiting. So in this episode, you've been waiting, like how many minutes is it now? Like about 15 minutes. Finally, Billy Batson says the magic word Shazam, turns into Captain Marvel. We see Captain Marvel flying over the city. He follows the car into the junkyard, and we see the car get picked up. Oh yeah, no, sorry.
The kids go and hide in a van.
Yes, they hide in a different car. That's what it is. Yes, and then he sees and that's the thing is that I'm not a Captain Marvel expert, but I don't think he has any powers beyond strength and flight, as far as I can tell. So it's not like he has X-ray vision. He kind of hears them kind of screaming with just his normal hearing, right? Mm-hmm. And so we see this van being picked up by, I don't know what those things are called, those big jaw things in a junkyard. And but it's funny though, because he has the power of flight, but all he does is run over, grab the van, and pull it down.
He pulls on it.
but we never see a shot of the guy operating,
controlling the crane.
Yeah, like you'd think that he'd be like, oh, maybe I should let this back down or help this guy out. No. So Captain Marvel pulls it down, the kids get out, and then he just lets go of it and it just goes back up. It's not a very dramatically directed scene. No. So then he has a little scene with the kids and he kind of talks. He's like, well, there might be consequences. You boys will have to face them. And he's kind of giving them like a little lesson. And they're like, oh, gee, Cap. They all kind of feel guilty, right? And then at this point, I don't know if it's here or later. Oh, yeah, Billy Batson, I think he remembers, or now he understands what the Shakespeare quote means, right? To thine own self be true. But it's funny because the episode does not end with Captain Marvel switching back to Billy Batson and reuniting with Mentor. It just ends with him giving kind of like a PSA directly to the audience. It's like, today we proved, hold on a sec here, I'm trying to get to it. Not to let others con you, just by calling you names. Remember, it often takes more courage to do what's right than it does to go along with the crowd. Big smile. See you next week. And then he just flies away, right? And that's the end of the episode. So clearly aimed at younger viewers, which is fine, right? Yep. But other than that, pardon me, let's just talk about first impressions. Kelly, what did you think of this pilot episode of Shazam?
2 seconds into this show, I was like, I feel like I'm watching an after-school special.
100%. Yep. It's like teaching. It's teaching
all
kids.
Geared towards like a lesson of the day. And achieving the goal of teaching someone a lesson of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
It very much feels like something that they would actually show in school.
Yeah.
Like on one of those days where there's like a substitute teacher and
they pull out the VCR and the TV.
Yeah, they roll the TV and the VCR in, and then they play something like this, and then it's very it's not great. Maybe it's because it's the pilot and they're just getting into it, or maybe that's just the style of the show. I don't think it's bad, by any means, but it's just like kind of basic and
I'm just wondering if all the episodes are going to be this cookie cutter like PSA type thing.
I have a feeling
you start the episode talking to the elders, and then all of a sudden, boom, you have to act out the lesson.
Right. And that's the thing is, I mean, if I have seen this before, it was when I was a kid, so I don't remember how the rest of the show goes. But assuming that's the way the show kind of goes. I think that's how they all are.
Yeah.
But again, if it's meant for kids, that's fine. But what were you gonna say, Josh?
It feels like a very young audience for sure.
Right.
Too. Like when we were talking about Superman or Wonder Woman, like the other couple of things, like kids could definitely watch it, but it's kind of more of like a general audience show, where this definitely feels very geared towards like young kids.
Right.
Which again is fine, but I think it doesn't have a chance to kind of be a little bit more elevated or serious. Like it's taking itself too seriously, and what what it's about is like kind of a goofy kids lesson. So
right.
I don't there's not enough like time for even for the characters to have fun or like do anything interesting. It's kind of just like preachy, so we can get the lesson of what's going on told to the audience and then end it.
I guess the thing about Captain Marvel is, at the end of the day, I think Captain Marvel is more suited to younger kids than Superman is, or a typical DC superhero. So after reading so many different reboots of Captain Marvel, I kind of think that maybe they should just accept, not defeat, but just accept what he is and just make him more for kids. Why not?
Yeah.
You know, like, what's wrong with kids having a superhero that's just for them? They already have Superman. They don't need two Supermans, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that something that like the movie did well was like you could tell that it was a kid in like a grown man's body. Like he's dancing around. He's like,
right.
You know, thinking about girls and stuff like it's fun. Like because you can.
Yeah,
tell
it's like a
that he's
Freaky
kid.
Friday. Like they switch bodies and then
This Billy doesn't seem like a kid. He doesn't act like a kid. He doesn't really look like one.
Well, again, that's a 2011 development. Before 2011, Captain Marvel was a completely separate persona than Billy Batson. He was not. He was not an adult with a kid's mind. He was an adult with an adult's mind. Yeah, there were two different, personalities. So.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, it's debatable. You could argue that.
Okay, but then that begs the question: where does Billy go when Captain Marvel shows up? Like, does he just go sit in the back of the RV and like drink some pop, or like where does he go when Captain Marvel shows up?
I guess he disappears into limbo. I don't really know, but the question is which version is more unique? You could argue that the 2011 version is better because the mind of a kid and an adult is more interesting. Maybe it makes him different from Superman, right? More different, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been done and it's been successful. You know what I mean? Like the kid in the man's body. The formula has worked.
Right.
Yeah.
So they should probably stick with that then.
I think so.
I found that if you took Captain Marvel out of this episode and it's just like a kid and an old man driving around in an RV helping kids, learn lessons, like nothing would have changed. Mm-hmm. They didn't need a superhero in this episode.
That's a fair point. You're totally right. All he did was save the kids at the end, which he didn't really do much.
All he needed to do for that was like to fly because he could do it faster than the RV would go.
Yeah, Good point.
I think the thing that could have saved this and really kind of changed it around is if instead of having Chuck as the character that we're following, it's Billy. So Billy meets these new kids in the neighborhood. He starts riding bikes with them. He's the one that's trying to convince them not to steal cars. Like, he's a kid still, right? So he can still kind of make these poor decisions. And then it's the elders' lessons that are kind of in his head trying to teach him right from wrong. Where without that, it definitely feels very like preachy and like just kind of following this random story, because none of these characters are ever going to show up again. And Billy and Mentor aren't going to change the next episode. So
that's a good point.
I think maybe that's where it's kind of not working and not going to be something that is very memorable. At least Shazam and Billy aren't going to be memorable.
Right. So why don't we talk about the actors in this episode? So first, let's talk about the actor that played Billy Batson, and his name is, I've got the cast right here, and it's Michael Gray. Kelly, what did you think of the actor that played Billy Batson, Michael Gray?
Not really much to say. There's not a lot of
Substance?
meaty material. Yeah, meaty material for him to get into. I feel like he's kind of like the premise, and then, the older Captain Marvel dude, he takes over. So
He, as we said earlier, he's probably a little bit too old. Apparently he was born in 1951. Actually, I guess he would have only been...
Oh my god, he's almost as old as my parents.
Oh, so he would have been... What year did this come out?
74, so he's 22.
74, so...
22, way too old.
Yeah. He was in his 20s.
10 years too old, if not more. That's crazy. Yeah, again, it defeats the purpose of him being a kid if he's 22. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
okay,
and he doesn't look like a kid either. Like,
no.
Some like actors can pull off being young and like a high school kid or something, but I didn't buy that he was that young in this.
Not at all.
I think
but I honestly wish
kids,
they had started this show with like a proper intro to, what this show's going to be about. Like, if it's about a superhero, let's hear about who this superhero is and what he can do and what he's done in the past. Even make that your opening. Like, I feel like when I watch this, like, I'm just watching some kid. I don't know who Billy is. I don't know what his background is. I don't even know why he has these powers.
Yeah, they really skim over it at the beginning. They kind of are just like, Billy's got superpowers and he's driving around with his mentor, the mentor.
Why doesn't mentor have a name? Like, that's just, I don't know.
It's really,
I find that silly.
We'll get to him in a minute, but yeah, there's some weird choices there. But since we talked about Billy Batson, let's talk about the actor that played Captain Marvel, Jason Bostwick. There seems to be this feeling that if you just give the actor the right hair color, the audience will fill in the gaps. But I really didn't think this guy was appropriate as Captain Marvel, Like, not any Captain Marvel that I've ever read. Again, other than having dark hair and being kind of like calmly well-spoken, there was really nothing about him that gave me a Captain Marvel vibe. Josh, what did you think?
Yeah, he's kind of just a blank slate, which is odd because it doesn't feel like we're seeing this being told through Billy or Shazam or Captain Marvel's perspective. So it's weird that he couldn't have a personality as well, because he's kind of just like generic guy swooping in to say a lesson. And even he doesn't really show up in the show until the last few minutes, and he turns into Captain Marvel, and we see him flying in the air, and then he grabs the car and pulls it down, and then he has his kind of like speech at the end. So I don't know. Maybe they'll explore a little bit more of his character as more episodes happen, but I don't know. I feel like we didn't get enough of him to even for him to even matter. Like Kelly was saying, they didn't even have to have him in this episode.
Yeah.
Doesn't really feel like anything would change. And you know what, too? It's like the only thing that he does is he pulls the car off of the crane, right? Like, that's the only thing. So it's not even like through his actions or through Billy's actions, the other characters changed and decided to do something different. The story just plays out, and then he shows up at the end to be like, that's not great. And then episode done.
You're totally right. Yeah.
So,
what did you think, Mike?
What did I think? Well, I didn't love him. He to be honest, he had an odd look to him, and he kind of reminded me of someone I know. And sometimes when people remind you of someone you know, you're like, ooh, it's kind of a weird,
right?
If you don't like that person. So
well, I told you, he reminds me of Zac Efron, like just in an older man's body.
Right.
Just kind of
not that I'm like a Zac Efron fan or not, but
That's the thing. I mean, if you look at Captain Marvel in the comics, obviously he's a bit like Superman, but he was a bit bulkier, I would say, with a kind of an odd hairstyle and like a big jaw. So he's kind of got that old classic strongman look, but this guy does not have it. I really don't think he's appropriate for it. Now, that being said, it turns out he was fired after episode 2 of season 2, and the producers accused him of holding out or not showing up to a shoot because he was holding out for more salary. But the truth was that he had sustained an injury the previous day in a shoot, and he was at the hospital. So he filed a lawsuit, and they ended up paying him out for the remainder of the season. But for the rest of the season 2 and all of season 3, Captain Marvel was played by an actor named John Davey. But again, I haven't seen his episodes, so I don't know how he was. But yeah. But Kelly, did you say what you thought of him? Like, what did you think of this actor?
I mean, this actor, he doesn't have obviously a lot to go on in this episode. He only shows up, the episode's 24 minutes, and he shows up at minute 14, 15, something like that. So,
right.
I mean, I also, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I don't know if this matters at all, but I noticed that I'm fairly certain that the Billy character and the Captain Marvel guy, like, they didn't even have the same eye color. I don't know if they're meant to, but I know I guess they're supposed to be separate people, but like from having seen the first movie and knowing that, I was expecting, that they were just the same person, like grown up, I guess. And I was like, why do they have different eye colors?
I didn't even notice that.
That's a good point.
I think they do, but I'm not sure.
But what did you think of his vibe?
I don't know. He was like, being the adult in the room around a bunch of kids, like, here's your lesson. And, I don't know if you're going to get in trouble, but you got to face consequences when you do bad things.
Right. Well, looking at the second actor, John Davey, he looks more
like an adult man. Like, he looks,
and more of a smile on him, but he also looks a little bit goofy. So I can't imagine he's much better as Captain Marvel, but who knows? Okay, so the only other lead that we can talk about here is the actor that played Mentor, which there's not really much to say about him, but his name was Tremayne. I don't even know what to say about this guy. I mean, he was okay, he was fine, but other than that, I mean, I guess he played his role okay, but there's so little to go on again. But Josh, what did you think of him?
Yeah, I think that he played a good role. Like, I liked whenever he was on the screen, but it's almost like his character was a little bit redundant as well. Like, he's kind of only there because we can't have a kid driving around the country.
We can't have a 22-year-old driving around the country.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Because everything that he says and the guidance that he gives Billy is the same kind of thing that the gods are like projecting into his mind. So it feels a little redundant at times. It would be, I think, way better if we didn't have those gods showing up and it was mentoring him, right? Like, he's the one giving him the proverbs. He's the one kind of guiding him through these situations. He's really kind of just an Uber driver throughout this entire episode. So I think the actor did a great job, like, did a fine job, but I just don't think he was given a whole lot to work with. And the character itself kind of feels a little pointless.
Right. Okay, Kelly, what'd you think?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I wouldn't have been able to put it in the, like, redundant word, because I would not have been able to come up with the word as quickly. But yeah, he's definitely reiterating the lesson that the elders are trying to convey. So my first question was, like, how does he know what the lesson of the day is? He doesn't hear the elders.
Good point. Yeah. Good point. I didn't even think about that.
So I'm like, how does he even know? Or is he there and he can, like, hear what Billy's talking to them about. Like, I don't understand if Billy goes to a different plane of existence when he talks to the elders. I mean, he goes to Cartoon Land, but where does his body go?
Right. Well, here's the thing. The premise of the comic book is so much more interesting. Like, the idea of him being an orphan and working at the radio station, and maybe he's living with Mary Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr., and the idea of kids working on their own against an adult world is more appealing, I think, to a little kid as a viewer than to Billy Batson riding around in a Winnebago with a mentor. And the mentor doesn't even have a connection to the Greek gods. He's just a regular guy. At least
how did he get chosen?
Right. At least if it was a Greek god, that'd be cool. Like if it was Hermes or something. And there was a little bit of...
He could even be like Zeus on Earth. He's just playing it down.
Yes, right. That's the thing is, if you're going to have Greek gods, you might as well use them, right? And that's the biggest mistake the 70s superhero shows made, is they played down all of the elements for the comic books, partly because of budget, but I think it's also because they just didn't really know how to handle them, and they wanted to make everything more realistic, which I think hurt a lot of these 70s TV shows.
Well, I also get the impression that, okay, so you don't want to follow the Little Orphan Annie vibe, but they should have, because Little Orphan Annie was for girls, and this would have been great for little boys.
I agree.
I mean, I don't think they came out at exactly the same time, but even in reruns, they would have played this around the same time as Annie would have.
Yeah. I think you're totally right. You're right. So there's only one other actor we have to talk about, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this movie, but one of the kids was in Saturday Night Fever. Okay. So the three kids, let me just look here. I want to find his name.
Oh, you're talking about the Billy kid.
Barry Miller, he plays Mike.
Oh, Mike, sorry.
He's the one with like the big fro.
I knew I recognized him from somewhere.
He was the one that was kind of like the troubled one of the group. Like, did you ever see Saturday Night Fever, Josh?
I don't think so.
It's a great movie. Gene Siskel's favorite movie of all time. Yeah. He's
Whose
the kid
movie?
that Gene Siskel. You know Siskel and Ebert?
Oh,
Gene Siskel's favorite movie. Yep. He's up on the bridge, and he's the one trying to get John Travolta to come up with him on the bridge. He's basically the kid that doesn't fit in with all his friends, and so he's always kind of causing trouble. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's kind of sad.
I recognized that guy.
Yep. So the rest of the actors are pretty generic. There's nothing really to talk about. They're not returning characters. So that's pretty much all we have to say about the pilot episode of Shazam. I guess the question is Kelly, are you going to purchase the rest of this series so you can watch it on your own on Google Play?
I'm gonna probably say no, because it was just so, I don't know, haphazard. Like, it was preachy, like was already said, but not only that, it felt more like something I would watch in school. And if all the episodes are going to have a lesson like that, like, I've already learned all those lessons, I hope, and I don't need to watch them again. Back in the 70s.
Understandable. Okay. Josh, are you going to buy this series on Google Play?
No, I don't think I am. I feel like there are a lot of other shows that have done this sort of thing better. Sure. There's not enough like interesting things that I'm gonna actually even take away from this. And I don't think that there would really be much, even if I were a kid, that would like pull me back in, because we didn't even really get any superhero stuff, really, like for it being that kind of thing. So yeah, I think I'm gonna pass. It's not awful, but it's just like it doesn't shine. Like nothing like sticks with me. So
yes, I'm gonna have to agree. I think if I had kids, I would definitely think they would enjoy this, but it's not something I could sit down and watch on my own, unfortunately. So probably no more Shazam for me anytime soon. But
I don't even think little kids would like it, though. There's nothing to hold their attention. Like, there's nothing gimmicky about it.
That's a good point.
There's no you remember with like the old, Batman and Robin series where like they would have like the pow and the slam and all those words that would come up on screen. Like, of course, those are at least will pull you in. Right. There's nothing here to pull you in.
And like the villains are doing like evil things. The heroes are like using science and gadgets to save the day. Like nothing really is happening in this one. Like how are they going to sell a Shazam or a Captain Marvel action figure?
From this episode.
Yeah, at least from what we've seen. Like there's nothing, I don't know.
What's interesting is so many fanboys used to hate on the Adam West Batman, okay? But if you compare the Adam West Batman to Wonder Woman or Shazam or the Hulk show or the Spider-Man show, the Adam West Batman was almost exactly like the comics. It exaggerated it, but everything was there. The villains were all from the comics. The sound effects were from the comics. The Batcave. They took everything. They really didn't change the premise, and it totally worked, right? Whereas all these other shows, let's make them more serious. Let's get rid of all the goofy stuff. And then what are you left with? An old man in a Winnebago, right? Like it's not even
right.
It's not Captain Marvel. So what's the point? Why even do it, right?
Totally agree.
But on that note, join us. Actually, this episode will air probably Monday, so you've already watched our review of Shazam: Fury of the Gods. Hopefully that is better than this pilot episode. The first Shazam film, I loved the tone. I didn't think the plot was great, but I loved the tone. Kelly, what did you think of the first Shazam film?
I really liked it. It was entertaining, and at least you understood the backstory. And then towards the end of the story, they were building it up, and you were trying to figure out, what they're going to do next, because it just felt like you knew there was a sequel coming. And you learn about more about the characters at home, and yeah, I don't know. I really liked it.
Excellent. All right, well, let's cross our fingers for Shazam: Fury of the Gods. And we definitely would like to thank you for joining us for 2 episodes in a row on our 2 podcasts, Kelly. Hopefully we can have you back again in the future. If we haven't worn you out already, with all this superhero chatter. But be sure to join us on the next episode of Taped Crusaders in 2 weeks. We will be reviewing Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze TV show. And hopefully if things go according to plan, Champ Ian Phillips will be our guest, so that should be fun. And be sure to join us on next week's episode of Slam, featuring the first masked superhero from DC, the Crimson Avenger. And our guest on that episode will be Kevin Morris. So yeah, be sure to join us for that. Yeah, and Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, we also want to thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Please keep in touch. You can find us all of our stuff on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find us on Facebook or YouTube at The Comic Book Syndicate as well. Keep in touch. Let us know what you guys think about the episodes and the comics and movies and all the stuff we're talking about. We want to hear from you and hear what you guys have to say. So let's keep that comics conversation going.
That's right. And until next episode, see you later.